Hello, my name is Briar. Welcome to my channel where I talk about my writing journey and various things that I feel like I know a lot about, feel like I know absolutely nothing about, and today ask for your help in the latter category because today's topic is genre, which I simultaneously feel like I understand and feel like is the most confusing thing ever. Most confusing thing about being a writer that I have ever encountered, and I could use some help and support about what genre is, how to utilize it, and why I should hate it less than I do. Because honestly, the term genre at this point in my life makes me want to bash my head against a wall because I hate it, and every time I think about it, I just get more confused. So, if you're interested in my rambly thoughts about what genre is, isn't, and why I hate it, but need it, stick around and we'll get into it. On its face, we know what genre is. It is how we categorize stories in order to find similar things and things that we like. However, as I start to think about genre more and define it for the stories that I'm writing, it gets more complicated. Or I make it more complicated, and it has gotten to the point where I no longer fully understand what genre even is, let alone how to apply these categories to my writing in order to make it make sense to other people. So we're going to start with the first question. What is genre? And back in kindergarten, first grade, really early elementary school, genre was super simple. It was fiction or nonfiction. Fiction is generally understood to be stories that are completely made up, never happened. Nonfiction, we believe to be stories that are based in fact and reality and truth until an expose comes out a couple years, days, months later to expose that these are not actually true and that this person is completely misrepresenting the facts in their stories. And we're not going to get too deeply into that. So for the purposes of this video, fiction is not real, and we know it, and nonfiction is real, and we know it. So far, a little bit complicated, but we're understanding what fiction and nonfiction are. We're still in that lower elementary level of understanding. It's fine. And then you get into the genres of fiction. We're ignoring nonfiction because I don't write that. And in fiction, we have the genres that you would find if you walk into a bookstore. Like if you walk into a bookstore, you're going to see a couple of big categories that all the books are put into. And this is generally understood to be what we're talking about when we talk about genre. Is it a romance? Then you can go to the romance section. If it's a fantasy, you can go to the fantasy section, even though fantasy and sci-fi are generally grouped together in some annoying ways. Is it a mystery? Go to the mystery section. Is it horror? Go to the end of the bookshelf and you'll find like this many horror books. And those are the generally understood larger breeds of genre. And there's a couple more that I'm not talking about because they're not coming to my head at the moment, but you can fill in the blanks. The big fiction umbrellas. Fine, great, handy dandy. What I write in these large overarching genres is fiction, and under fiction I write fantasy. Great, simple. I understand this. And then you get into things like subgenres. And that's where all of my supposed understanding of what genre is goes out the window, and I'm confused. Because I always thought that my stories were urban fantasy. Because generally what I write is fantastical things happening in our otherwise world as we know it. And then I started sending my stories out to other readers who were helping me to develop a query letter so that I could query agents. And one enterprising reader told me that I was doing genre wrong and it was not urban fantasy because it was not set in a city. And in fact, what I was writing was contemporary fantasy. So I looked it up, decided, yeah, that fits. So I changed my label. I do not write urban fantasy subgenre, I write contemporary fantasy subgenre. And then another reader of my work, another reading partner, said, it looks like you write paranormal fantasy because you have creatures and not so much magic. So your work is paranormal. What? See me Googling what is paranormal fantasy as a subgenre, and suddenly I'm like, do I write contemporary? Do I write urban? Do I write paranormal? I don't know. It's fantasy in the real world. And then I got confused. And then I started researching more. And then I started thinking, do I even write any of these things? Maybe what actually fits me best is a fantasy thriller, because lots of people fight and lots of people die in my stories. Maybe it's a fantasy horror. Is it a dark fantasy? What even is a dark fantasy? What are these words? What do they mean? And how do I get people to know what my story is about if I can't even define it using these subgenres? And then I found out you can get even more detailed by talking about what niche your genre fits. Because my story has a werewolf in it, it fits into the werewolves and shifters niche of something. Contemporary, urban, paranormal. It's not a romance, I can tell you that much. And then it gets even more confusing if you start to add in tropes, which are other categories and labels that you can put on your stories to say, this is what you can expect to find inside. So I think my story fits into the found families trope. And that's great. And there's probably some more tropes that I don't even understand, because all of these labels have made me bash my head against a wall and hide under a rock because I don't know what I'm doing anymore. That's how I feel about subgenres and niches and tropes. Because I think it's very confusing. And that brings me into the second part of this ramble, which is why it's so important for writers to understand their genre. Because it's great if you just write whatever you want and you make your story come together and you're happy with it. But if you ever want anyone to read your writing, you have to know how to tell them what to expect. And you use these terms, these genres and subgenres and niches and tropes to explain what's in your story in quick and marketable ways so that readers who want to read what's in your story can expect that and buy your book. And that's where I run into a wall. Because how am I supposed to utilize all of these categories and genres and terms when I don't understand them? When I feel like it's different words for the same soup. Because that's how I feel. And that's why it's so confusing to me. And I am definitely going to be relying on things like alpha readers, beta readers, critique partners, editors, other people to help me define these things, because I suck at it. I've always hated labels. I've always hated labeling myself. I've always hated labeling what I've done. And I feel like all of these genres and conventions that are so absolutely useful and necessary, they're out to get me, because I never feel like I know enough to be comfortable labeling my work as anything anymore. Because there's always going to be somebody that comes in and says, oh, that's not what this is. Your work is this. What? So I guess the purpose of this video is really more for me to ramble on about things that I don't understand and ask fellow writers, do you also not understand genre? How do you assign these labels to your work? Because I always feel like whatever label I assign is not right, but I don't want to set people up with an expectation that my writing is X when really it's Y based on their understanding of what these labels mean. So yeah, genre, super important, super confusing, and I don't like it, but it's necessary. So let me know, what are your feelings about assigning genres to things? Because, again, I think my feelings are pretty clear. I don't like it. I see that it's necessary. It doesn't mean I like it. And it's very confusing. If you want to help me understand genre, I would love your input. If you want to harangue me for being very confused and making a rambly video about my confusion, please leave it in the comments down below, because this is who I am and what I do. I overthink things to the point that they are super complicated and I no longer understand what's up, what's down, and what's all around me. Coming up next is going to be a video about characters, because my favorite thing to write is characters, and I feel like I have a lot more understanding of writing characters than I do about writing genres. If you've enjoyed this rambling mess of a video, thank you so much, and please remember to like, subscribe, and leave your comments and your thoughts on the confusing mess that is genre in fiction in the comments down below, and I will be super happy for anybody's input, because clearly I have no idea what I'm doing. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.